Okay, this video is called Field Trip to Japan. I had a friend recently who spent 3 weeks in Japan. I've also seen videos about Japan. I'm friends with two Japanese doctors who tell me stories about them, and of course, read a lot about Okinawa and whatnot. And over the years, I've read a little bit about Japanese history. I don't know that much about it, but there's a couple interesting things come out of this. The first one is that they are super clean. And here's just some Japanese students, probably from the 1960s, but that's not that different than how they are now, according to my friend. Basically, they're very clean. They said the sidewalk is so clean. There's not a single piece of litter. You could eat off the sidewalk. They said the people are very clean. They have no tattoos, no body piercing. They dress much better than we do. She says the average American, like you'll see on TV or on the street, she said, compared to a Japanese, is kind of like a third world savage. Okay, that's a pretty big statement. Okay, they said the crime in Japan is next to zero. They said young children can walk around by themselves in the city at night. That's what they said. Now, that might be an exaggeration. I looked up crime statistics. United States has 150 times more violent crime and RAPE than does Japan. So it's extraordinarily safe. It's also extraordinarily, uniform in its population. They don't have diversity, okay? And there's a lot of people who think the word diversity is pushed on us by the billionaire perverts as a copy of Rome. Rome used to do what was called divide and conquer. The more divided the public, the more broken apart all the families with divorce and other problems, the more different ethnic groups don't get along, the easier they are to control by the billionaire perverts that run the world. Okay, other things about Japanese that are good: tremendous respect for their elders, for their ancestors. They very much live in the moment. If you're with one of them personally, they tend to be very polite, very nice. They have very good manners. They're smart. They're hardworking. Of course, they're good at manufacturing. They make much better cars than the USA does. They've done a lot of good work in electronics. They developed the electronic rice cooker. Toshiba made the first laptop computer. They had Sony with the original Walkman cassette player. You could walk around. I remember that when I was young. They developed blue LED lights. The red LED lights were invented elsewhere, but the blue LED lights came out of Japan. The early car GPS systems. They played major roles in the invention and development of audio of CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray discs, fiber optics, PlayStation, Nintendo. So they're extraordinarily good at electronics. Very beautiful gardens, just a tremendous aesthetic sense of beauty and color. And for example, Frank Lloyd Wright was amazed by how beautiful the Japanese gardens were, and he sort of incorporated Japanese architecture almost in combination with a Roman style for his architecture, and that was a rather amazing thing in the world at that time. And that's often a way to make something really good, is take things from two faraway places that are both great and combine them. They're much less likely to smoke MJ than are Americans. Probably the biggest thing is incredibly low crime. Okay, now that's a nice thing. What are some of the cons about Japan and Japanese people? Not much of a sense of humor. They don't joke that much. They're kind of quiet, kind of reserved. They seldom joke. They're not that verbal and playful like some other populations might be. They have a very much male-dominated patriarchy, and they don't like foreigners. And that's characteristic of a male-dominated patriarchy. Women tend to be more accepting of foreigners than men do. And so in a male-dominated society, they don't want foreigners there. And, on the other hand, look at what's happening to all the Western countries. You can't blame them, okay? They only allow tourists, or if they need a foreigner to do some type of job, they'll be allowed in the country, but you have to live there for 10 years before you can become a citizen. So Japanese has kept itself intact, unlike the Western countries are all being destroyed by open borders. The men do smoke a lot of cigarettes. They talk a lot. The women, in comparison, are relatively quiet. They're very respectful of the men. They actually often kind of like serve the men at dinner and that sort of thing. The religion, in my opinion, is weak. I respect the ancestor. They have tremendous respect for their ancestors. They used to have picnics, and I was reading about the Okinawans. They'd have picnics at the graveyards, out of respect for their ancestors. But a godless religion, here'll be my criticism of them. They don't produce much in art. I would actually say I'm not aware of any non-Christian culture that does much that I would consider impressive in art. Like you look up, great Japanese paintings. I'll show you a picture of a wave. This is something that a freshman in college could do in a drawing class. Okay, it's not. There really was very little impressive art. And I think that's characteristic. Christianity sort of propels a person to look beyond themselves, to see themselves as part of the whole battle for good and evil in the world, and to be transcendent. You know, we're created in the image of God. He's a creator, therefore we can be a creator and try to understand him and his creation and all that. And it just generates incredible art. So even though their gardens are magnificent, their painting is pretty weak. I didn't even see any sculpture. I don't know if they've done any significant work in sculpture. The architecture, in my opinion, is kind of simple, kind of boring. The country's a little poor compared to America in terms of, like, a lot of them don't even have cars. They ride bicycles. It's very overcrowded in a sense compared to America. They've only got 4% of the size of land as America, but they've got 125 million people. That means one-third the population. Okay, so so they're very crowded into their country in comparison with Americans. So that's all that stuff about, America's population needs to be reduced, is very much exaggerated, as you can well imagine, for many reasons. The billionaire perverts want everything for themselves. Let's see. The ones who eat more oil and animal foods, they'll have more health problems. Most of them eat lots of rice and lots of vegetables, and they were relatively healthy, at least the spots where my friend was visiting and traveling. Let's see. Anything else interesting about them? But I think what happens is, if you don't have a Christian religion, basically you live for your family and yourself. And so, it's like, who cares about generating a work of art? Who cares about doing something, bigger for mankind? Electronics is very logical and amoral. Okay, but you start getting into art, architecture, painting, sculpture, all this stuff, and literature. Like, not much literature comes out of Japan. I don't quote any Japanese author that I could think of. And maybe they did some good martial arts stuff, of course, as part of defending themselves and stuff. But yeah, not a lot of literary scholars, none of that kind of stuff. And the Japanese doctors I know, they're both very smart, very nice, very competent. They're not jokers though, that's for sure. They're not playful in that sense. Let's see what else. But they're good guys. I like them. Okay, what else? Prediction. In the past, like, let's say around the time World War II, America was a largely Christian country, and we were partnered with Japan versus communist China. Overall, I realize there's exceptions to that, but overall. Whereas now the Democrats have been taken over by Cow Moon East, and basically they're partnered, as far as I can tell, with China. Okay, so I think in the future, once they get done, if they're successful, their goal is to get rid of all the Western Christians and then diminish the population as much as they can. I think by about 90% is what they want, based on what I've read. And then after that, if they haven't done so already, they're going to just conquer Taiwan and Japan, and they're going to enslave all those people. That's what seems to be coming. And let's just be honest and logical about it. Hopefully not. Hopefully freedom will continue in the world. I would like to stay free. I don't want to be a slave, or worse. But unfortunately, the billionaire perverts, man, they're so smart and they're so aggressive, and they keep gaining ground, and the sort of innocent regular people and the Christians, they keep losing ground because they're just ignoramuses and they don't understand what's happening.